this past Saturday. And after all the results and breaking down the action that happened this past Saturday, this video I will be going through each of the significant athletes that won or lost on the previous pay-per-view and matching them up with their next opponents and just mapping out the landscape for these guys for the next fights that they should be having, and when we would like to see them and who they should be fighting. So let's get right into this. Fights to make after UFC 319. Now, let me move this real quick. So, there's two options with Hamzat. And if we can which I don't think will happen, they're going to save him. But if he really does return in October in Abu Dhabi, he should take on Rainier D. Ritter. And the reason I think they should do this is because RDR already said, he already came out and said he would take this fight. This is a very interesting matchup with RDR's grappling pedigree and unorthodox style. And unlike Dricus, he really does have a good grappling style and has a good guard and bottom submission game. And I think that could pose some threats against Hamzat like he hasn't seen. He's only seen that good bottom submission game from Gilbert Burns. However, RDR is a big guy. And while I don't think size really plays that big of a difference in fights like these, I still do think with RDR's strength and his awkward grappling and his clinch game and knee game to the body and things like that, I think this would be a very interesting matchup. And if it is October that we get to see Hamzat fight, which I find very, very unlikely, I doubt that happens. But if there is the chance, which it should happen, that's who I would match him up with. That's who is most deserving and ready to fight Hamzat. Now, I know a lot of people have been talking about Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. While I do want to see that fight, and I think we will see that fight in the future, Anthony just came off a win against Roman Dolidze. And he's still, I think he's like number 7 in the rankings. So I don't think that's the fight to make next. I think you got to match up Fluffy with somebody in the top 5, and then you give him that shot. But if they don't do that in October, they should for sure go, obviously, with the winner of Imavov and Berhalo. Imavov arguably already deserves this shot, but even with a win over Berhalo, which I'm pretty sure Imavov is going to win. I still need to rewatch some fights, and we'll get into those in a couple weeks. We'll get into the picks and previews for this fight card. But the winner of this fight is for unarguably the number 1 contender for the title shot. And while they are two NPCs and they have, like, Berhalo has the least amount of aura out of any of the fighting nerds. Not the most exciting guy, but not boring. Imavov's actually pretty exciting. But the only thing about this matchup is that Hamzat will put both these guys on their back and keep them very, very easily, I think. I don't see much of a competition there, but that is the rightful number 1 contender for the middleweight title shot after this fight happens. So if we can't get Hamzat in October, that means they'll save him. And Hamzat, which they may save him for the first Paramount card, so January would line up right there. However, he took no damage whatsoever. Into August is when this fight happened. So, you take September, October off, and we'll be generous. 3 months. September, August, November. Hamzat needs to be fighting in December or January. And if he's not, that's a big negative sign for the future of the middleweight division and who our champion is if we're not getting a decently quick turnaround after a fight where he took no damage whatsoever. So this is what I think's next for Hamzat. Most likely it'll be the winner of Imavov and Berhalo. And I don't think those fights will be too interesting though. But I do think the RDR fight would be super interesting. But let's get into the next one. We're going to who should DDP fight next? And this kind of ties into who should fight Hamzat next as well. No matter what, you have to do the RDR DDP fight. It is the fight to make in the division for DDP. Now, if you do that October fight with Hamzat and RDR, which is unlikely, but if that does happen, RDR will probably lose. So then that's perfect. You have DDP and RDR coming off title shot losses, and they'll get to fight who gets to keep their name at the top of the division. And also, like most likely, it will be Imavov and Bahalio. And this is a perfect fight for RDR to get a win and secure a title shot, and for DDP, if he can get the win and against RDR, it will show that he still belongs at the top of the division against a surging contender like RDR. And this fight would just be hilarious. They should have like an alternative broadcast where it's like animated, and when they throw punches, they could put like red rubber mallets in their hands and stuff. But this would be super interesting. I think like the clinch game exchanges would be interesting on the feet. Just seeing these two guys strike and seeing if RDR could have the same sort of efficiency Hamzat did in grappling Dricus du Plessis. So I think this is a very interesting matchup in a fight pretty much all the fans want to see. So I think no matter what, you got to book this fight next for Dricus. And Dricus, like most likely, Hamzat's not going to fight RDR in October. So, and I think RDR is ready for a fight. So DDP, you took like no damage, man. Get a quick turnaround. And try to assert your legacy as a top middleweight guy and take out a surging guy like RDR. And RDR, this would be your chance to secure a title shot. So I think this is a no-brainer and what should happen next for DDP for sure. Moving on, Lerone Murphy. Lerone Murphy gets a title shot. Lerone Murphy deserves a title shot. Movsar Evloev pulled out once again, fighting Aaron Pico. Lerone took this fight on 3 weeks' notice, was in shape, absolutely destroyed and decapitated Aaron Pico, and I think that submits him he's undefeated on a great winning streak right now, and I think this would be a great fight to watch. And I think this is also a good fight for Volk and his legacy, taking on a undefeated surging contender like Lerone Murphy, especially Lerone's style on the feet against Volk's style on the feet. I think this would be very interesting, and also seeing if Volk decides to mix up the grappling. I think this would be a very interesting title fight. I would probably go with Volk, but man, Lerone's good. I like Lerone. I think he's really good, but I think Lerone deserves it at this point. Movsar, at this point, man, and like the inactivity and stuff, you're gonna have to find another contender. And even though, like, if they do book Volk Movsar next, I wouldn't be too upset, but I do think with how like everything played out for Movsar and not ended up fighting Pico, I think Movsar, you got to fight another guy. And yeah, and it's going to get interesting too if John Silva goes out there and absolutely sleeps Diego Lopez September 13th in San Antonio. It's not too far away from me. Maybe I'll pop out and say hello there. But I think this would be a very good matchup, and I think Lerone deserves it after his finish the other night. Moving on, what do we do with Pico? Andre Touchy Fili. Andre Fili's coming off a win against Christian Rodriguez. He fraud-checked the fraud checker. And I think this is a perfect fight for Pico against a top 25 sort of featherweight in Andre Fili. And I think coming off that brutal knockout loss and fighting a guy like Fili who is comparable to those, what you would call top dogs in Bellator, I think skill-wise, Fili's pretty comparable to those guys. And I think in a fight like this, you'll really get to see where Pico is at in his career, and you can matchmake him accordingly after this fight. He does not deserve a ranked guy at all. He's proved nothing. And I think this would be a good gauge for where Pico's at. I'd probably take Pico to win this fight, maybe. And I think this is the proper match. Give him a guy like Fili to see where he really is at in the division against a veteran of the sport in the featherweight division in Fili. So I think this is the fight they should make next. Would be a great prelim fight on a pay-per-view or a great addition to a fight night card main card. Moving on, Carlos Prates. Now, I know he said he wants to fight in Brazil, and I'm really hoping they get that done. And at this point, I think they have the leverage over Leon Edwards to get him to fly out to Brazil and take this fight. Now, with the way the the welterweight division, is shaping out right now, this is really the only guy you want to match up Prates with. Edwards, I believe, stands at number 4 in the welterweight division still right now, and most likely will be getting Ian Gary and Sean Brady matched up. We're going to get and Jack Della and Islam probably at the end of the year. And we don't know what's going on with Shavkat. Bilal and Kamaru is obviously the fight to make there. This is obviously the fight you give Carlos Prates. This is a star brewing in Carlos Prates, even though he lost to Ian Gary. And like Leon is on a skid, hasn't looked great in his last 2 performances. And I said, if you're the UFC man, you say, Leon, get out here to Brazil. You're going to fight Carlos Prates. And, if Leon wins, that's a big statement because everybody's calling him washed. Everyone's calling him old. He was never that good category. But also for Prates, when you got a guy like Prates, if I'm the UFC man, I want him going out there and knocking out Leon Edwards in Brazil and inserting himself in the top 5. And that's what you want for sure, and that's why this matchup makes so much sense. It'd be a great fight, I think. It either forces Leon to actually go out there and strike with a guy like Prates, or I think Prates could just keep Leon on the back foot and finish him at some point with how we've seen Leon fight lately. But I think this is a very interesting and great matchup. Leon, I don't know how many people were picking Sean Brady to beat Leon in the first place. You lost to Bilal. You're on a 2-fight skid. You're not that popular. If I'm UFC, I use some leverage. I get this fight booked for Brazil, or at least at a later date. But the thing is, you don't want to match up Prates with a guy like Joaquin Buckley, who's like a spot above him in the rankings, coming off a loss. Because how much does that really do for Prates? A guy like Prates is top 5 ready, and you want him there. He's a star brewing. He has the Fighting Nerds aura, middle school TikTok edits aura. And you want him in the top 5. He's a highlight reel waiting to happen, especially after that beautiful spinning elbow that happened last Saturday. This is the fight to make, and hopefully this gets done for the Brazil card. Moving on. What's next for Jeff Neal? I really like who I have Jeff Neal matched up with. Kevin Holland. I think this is a perfect gauge fight for both of these guys, points in their career. It's good for Jeff Neal because it's a pretty good matchup for Jeff Neal, I think. I know even though you could kind of compare Holland's style with Prates in a way, however, his footwork and his quickness isn't as precise as Prates, and he's a lot more hittable, I think, even though he does have a pretty solid chin, even though he got dropped by D-Rod last fight. But this fight is a good gauge for Jeff Neal. He's still a top 15 guy. Still deserves to be fighting the best of the best there in the top 15 rankings. And this is a good fight for Kevin Holland. Because it's not a horrible matchup for him. And if he actually decides to start taking his career seriously, after that pathetic loss against Daniel Rodriguez, he needs to beat a guy like Jeff Neal to make people remember. Because, man, people forget, man. People are forgetting, man. With how he's handling his career as of lately, and losing a fight he for sure should have not lost. Maybe Daniel Rodriguez makes us eat our words and goes out there and somehow, ends up in the top 5 or something. But I think this is a good gauge matchup for both of these guys and where they stand at in their career. And it's honestly, for the business point of view for the UFC, I bet they're paying both these guys a decent amount of money. And then you see who loses this fight, and maybe you give them one more. And then you see if you really want to be paying them even though they should be on the roster while they're still good, just because it sucks letting a guy like either of these guys walk if they end up on a 2 or 3 fight skid. However, I'm just trying to think of I'm trying to put out what I really think should happen, but also kind of keep in mind the whole business model of the UFC and how they like to do stuff, so it can seem still somewhat realistic. But I think this is a fun fight too. You could put this on a main card of a pay-per-view and people would be excited. A main card opener. You could still do that with these two guys. And it'd be a good fight. Great gauge matchup to see where these guys belong at in their career and with future matchmaking perspectives and how much you want to promote them as a promotion, as the UFC wants to push a guy like Holland anymore, or maybe, kind of put a little more stock into Jeff Neal as a guy who really does perform well and is a top 15 staple in the welterweight division. So I think this is a great matchup to have. Moving on, what's next for MVP? First of all, I want to say, needs to stay in the middleweight division. He's better there. He's going to have better luck there. He's quicker than pretty much anyone at that division, and I think he may be the best striker at that weight just because of his speed and elusiveness and his ability to not get hit. As long as he keeps the fight on the feet, he's going to be a hard guy to beat in the division. And I think when you have MVP's arguably a star. People really like this guy. They may not even know his name, but they'll see him, on Instagram or whatever, and they're like, oh, he's fighting? I want to tune in. So I think you kind of want to push him a little quick into the middleweight rankings. And I know a lot of people have said they want the Adesanya fight. The only reason I'm not putting the Adesanya fight on here is because I just think it'd be super boring. I wouldn't be upset if they made that fight. I just think it'd end up being so boring with both of them just trying to counter-strike. But this is why I think you match him up with Sean Strickland. I think you could actually get a decently good fight out of Sean Strickland if you match him up with MVP. I'm somewhat of a Sean Strickland fan, I guess you could say. Sean Strickland likes to duck fights, and I could see him trying to duck this matchup maybe possibly. But also, I think it's a good matchup for both these guys. I think Sean is in no bargaining position, especially after his suspension and all that. And I think this is a good fight to make for MVP, trying to push him into that top 5 spotlight. It's a good matchup for him. And, it's good for Sean Strickland because I think this fight will be competitive back and forth if it happens with their styles. So if Sean goes out there and wins, it's good for him as well, even though how much are we really wanting to push Sean Strickland in the title picture still in big 2026 coming up. So maybe put this on like a London card. That'd be so hilarious, I think, seeing Strickland in London or something like that right now. But I think this is a great fight night main event or a UFC pay-per-view main card bout. And yeah, I think they should make this next. Moving on, our final little matchmaking. Jared Cannonier should take on, after a bit of a lackluster performance against MVP, the winner of Abus Magomedov and Joe Pyfer. And because Jared Cannonier, after that loss against MVP, is going to be somewhere in that 15 to 12 range in the middleweight division. And I believe with how the rankings shook out, Abus just slid out of the rankings. So whoever wins this fight, who I'll probably be taking Pyfer most likely, whoever wins this fight, this is where you use Cannonier to build up your next guys shooting into the rankings and making their way up to the top 5 in possibly a title fight. And that's just the position Cannonier is at this point. He's 41 years old, looked very hesitant in his last fight. And I think either of these guys against Cannonier would be an interesting matchup. And arguably, you would maybe take Cannonier to beat either of these guys with what we've seen from them so far. But I believe that is it, guys. That is it for this video. And let me know in the comments what y'all think about the matchmaking I did. And let me know what maybe if y'all have any other interesting fights y'all would like to see come up. I'm thinking about maybe making a video of just in general, these are fights that need to be booked in the UFC ASAP. Thinking of making a video like that. But please like and subscribe. Drop a comment below about what you think about these matchups and maybe where you would like to see them and kind of the time frame of seeing these matchups and how they would play out. And if y'all disagree, let me know why in the comments below. Sorry the energy for this video was a bit lackluster. Still feeling quite ill. Woke up with a fever this morning. But I gotta stay on the YouTube grind, man. Gotta get these views up. Gotta get these numbers up. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys are enjoying the content. Like, subscribe. Send it to your mother's mother. Get everybody watching. Get more fans of the sport. I love this sport. I love making these videos, and I'm hoping I get some more subscribers and some people commenting and interacting with the community one day. So, like I said, let me know what you think of the matchups in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and tell your parents about Seeing All MMA. Thank you for watching. Until next time.